Welcome to Whiskey and Windage, the two-way podcast for the people, by the people. I'm your host, Mike, joined by my co-hosts, Adam and Matt. Adam, how are we doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing good, man. I had a little time off this week. It was a good week. Y'all been grinding over there. We all been working hard, and it's just it's been a good week. And then I'll be honest, I have to say this: I nerded out. I was at the range, right? I don't have a lot of range stories. There I was, and I used math.
Here's what happened.
I used my math, and I zeroed my optic in 3 rounds. Well, 6 to confirm. But
Thanks,
it was just
Todd Hodnett.
It's like that day. I know it's that day of like when I did my math. I saw my grouping. I mathed it. I went back, and it was like the best grouping in my entire life. So that was my win for the week.
Hell yeah, dude. Yeah. And Matt, you have how's your week been? But also, part 2 is that you've been working to get this guest on and going through some channels. So, man, how was your weekend and who we got tonight lined up?
Dude, it was a freaking great weekend. We film on Sundays, so Sunday's also my range day. Got the wife out today. She's finally showing up consistently enough that she's starting to really develop some skill and get excited about it. So had a great range day. Awesome. And I am really excited about this guest. And I tell the story a little bit. I'll tell the story when we talk to him, but this might really be, thinking back, like the core of the very beginning of me customizing any firearms was because of this company. So it led to all this nonsense. I am super excited. We have the big man in charge over at Volquartsen, Mr. Scott Volquartsen himself. About to load in actually just now. So if you guys don't have anything else, let's freaking go, dude.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
We want to welcome to the show, welcome to Whiskey and Windage, Scott Volquartsen from Volquartsen. Welcome to Whiskey and Windage, Scott.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was when Matt mentioned that he had talked to your team and went through the proper channels and got everything booked. It was like, oh, wow, this is going to be a fun one because this lineup is a serious lineup, but it also is a very fun lineup and a very sporty lineup. I guess that's the best way to put it.
And that's what we try to do is attack it from the angle of fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously firearms are a very serious thing, but at the same point, I think there's enough seriousness out in the market when it should be there that we try to approach it from, it can also be a fun family day at the range. It doesn't always have to be, as serious sometimes we like to make it.
You're speaking my language. Sorry to cut you off, but you're speaking my language. Talking with other friends of ours in the industry, they say that firearms are such, it's such a heavy topic. It's a heavy burden for this industry to bear. So instead of talking about the heaviness of that and what could come of that, they want to focus on the fun and the lighthearted side. And honestly, to be real honest, other than the military, 90%, don't quote me on that, but 90% of the industry is the fun side. The 5 to 10% is just the protection side.
Yeah, and I think so many of us got into it from the fun side. Yeah. We didn't grow up when we were 8 or 9, 10 years old, whatever, introduced to firearms. It wasn't from in most cases, it probably wasn't from protection or self-defense. It was from shooting bottle caps, from, doing whatever, along those lines, which, was based on fun.
Adam, this kind of goes to what we were talking about the other day about children and boys and sticks. So what I was going to say, Scott, was it's interesting, but it just shows the protector, the hunter, the whatever you want to call it. It's almost like it's instinct in humans. I hate to bring it that way, but at the same time, my response when people say, "Oh, that's not something that's instinctual," I challenge people to say, well, take a group of 5 or 6 boys between the ages of 7 and 10 and give every one of them a long stick and tell me what they do with them. They're going to turn them into swords, spears, rifles,
Someone's
whatever.
getting hit. Someone's getting hit with a stick.
Yeah, someone's getting hit with a
Someone's
stick.
getting hit with a stick.
And it's not because someone physically taught them to pick that thing up and do that. It's kind of an instinctual thing. And I hate to speak of it that way, but just like you said, it's fun. Kids pick up sticks and it's a gun, and I'm fighting in this battle against aliens, whatever it is. And I think that's lost sight of, and I'm glad that you guys are a company, for one, that takes their job very serious, but also you're showcasing the it's all serious, like you said, but the more fun side of the firearms industry.
Yeah, there's like for us, there's nothing more fun than if we're doing a demo or something like that and we have a new shooter. And you can put them on target or get them to hit steel. And just like the smile or the reaction that they get that very first time, it goes back to your comment about it being instinctual. I mean, there's something, even for those that grew up scared of firearms or whatever it might be, when they pull the trigger and they hit a target, especially like something reactive like steel, ding, there's a smile and a joy that comes in most cases. I don't want to.
Not all, but
not all, but most times when we see it, if they're at the range already, they probably have some desire to learn it, but that smile or that reaction that they get is second to none.
So Scott, I think most of our listeners are going to be familiar with Volquartsen, at least with the name and some of the things that you guys do. And it is your show, but I also the show for Volquartsen. But I also want to touch on you, the man who's currently behind Volquartsen as the big guy in charge over there, and like give us a little backstory, because your dad started the business, right?
My dad started it.
Did you grow up always around firearms? What was your introduction into firearms and the firearms industry?
We grew up with it because Dad started it as a hobby before, like a year before I was born.
Okay.
So as far back as I can remember, he'd be sitting in his recliner at night. There'd be guns taken apart on the end or the, coffee table, whatever, napkins with little sketches that he would draw up parts, and we just kind of knew when he was in that mode, you don't interrupt him. Mm-hmm. Because at the time,
know how to put it back together.
Correct. Yeah. Well, and that's what I always explain to people is like people during that time, a lot of younger people don't, I don't even think they can fathom trying to put a gun back together without YouTube or all the online.
Oh yeah.
Tutorials,
all the resources, man.
Uncle Google was not a thing.
They all learned, like people, my dad and before, they learned through trial and error. And so, and at that point for him, it was a hobby. So he actually had a day job that he absolutely hated. And then in the early 80s, in 1984, he decided to go 86, full-time into it himself. But it's always interesting because he kept it the only people he would allow to work for him were family.
That's cool. That's usually the big no-no in business, but like, that's really cool. Like you never mix business and family.
And his thought was, if your last name's on it, you're going to put a little more, time and detail and attention to quality into it.
I can see it.
And then in 2005, my brother and I took over. Nobody know. My younger brother is actually co-owner of the business with me now, but he doesn't do events. He's more behind the scenes. And at that point, it was great having it a family-owned business, or just family working here. But we also saw how hard it was growing up for Dad to take a vacation because Mom and Dad worked in the business together. So if they took a vacation, the whole shop shut down.
Right.
So we're like, we have to expand and we want to grow from that. So our challenge was, how do we hire? How do we expand? But get people outside the family to buy in like they're part of the family. And fortunately, I think we've done a very good job at doing that.
That's interesting, because
there's been growing pains. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but for the most part, they buy in. And a lot of it, I think, is most of the people that work for us all grew up in this area, which, for people that don't know, we're in Carroll, Iowa, which is a town of about 10,000 people. So it's not a huge pool of people to go out and find employees from, but we've been very fortunate with the people we have found. And
I think it's interesting because you say that you first started with just family and then you stepped outside of that, and the reason was because family would take more pride in having their name on the side of whatever they're making. But at the same time, as an entrepreneur, it's tough to find good help because no one quite cares about your company as much as you do. So when you do find those employees, that care 70% as much as you, they're golden. They are the ones you want. And so I think that's amazing. Now, I know the answer to this, but talk a little bit about Pop's in aspect of, he obviously didn't just start with the 22, correct?
No, he started, he did everything general gunsmith. He actually started with bluing. Years ago, it was called Tom's Gun Bluing Shop. And he had a very unique relationship with Bob Brownell, who was the founder of Brownell's, where for whatever reason, Dad said he could call him after hours and get, any sort of guidance or mentorship from him.
That's really cool.
He's like, to this day, I have no idea why he said, outside of the fact I was from Iowa and they're an Iowa-based company, he's like, and he said, maybe he did it with a lot of others. I don't know. So that was the majority of what Dad did when he got started. And then he started getting into customizing basically any firearm that was out there. And I think a lot of it started was he wanted to improve his hunting firearms and had no money to do it. So the only way he could do it was to figure it out himself.
Makes sense.
Because his background, he went to school for like art and business. Nothing to do with machining, nothing to do with like design or anything like that. So everything he did was self-taught. And then he went through the 80s. He was basically a one-man shop with Mom helping out, but he was doing all sorts of, he did custom revolvers. He would do, high-power hunting rifles, basically everything. And then in the early 90s, he's like, I really need to kind of narrow down my focus. And he looked around at the market and he said, there's already people, even back then, doing a lot of stuff with ARs and 1911s. He's like, where's a market that people aren't really...
Nobody's touching
right now. And he's like, everybody that shoots typically has a 22.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm going to, and so him and Jim Clark from Clark Custom basically were the first two guys that started doing anything with the 1022. And that's where he started really started getting his name. He had been featured in a few magazines in the 80s that kind of got his reputation out there.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's, very grateful for some of those writers because, that landscape has changed a little bit now. It's a lot more pay for play.
Yep.
But back then he obviously didn't have any money to buy ads. So he had to get them to showcase his firearms strictly on the quality of his work and that they were outside the box of what everybody else was doing.
I think that's great, though, because people don't understand that. And to highlight what you're saying, now I can come out with whatever I want to come out with in whatever field it is, whether it be firearms, it could be medical, it could be just, construction tools, whatever. I can create a product, and if I put enough money into it, into the advertising, whether it be, Google ads or whatever it is, it's going to build for me. But like you're saying, back in the day, all these publications, the internet wasn't around. So the publications were, you either had to build something good enough that a magazine wanted to do an article on you, or you had to pay so you could be in the back of that magazine. And sometimes both. And it's great. I think you said it was in the late 80s. It was American Handgunner, wasn't it, that really catapulted?
Yeah, he had a couple different, and I believe in '89 was the first time he was on the cover of American Handgunner. And then he had a 3-gun spread in the center, 3 different pistols that he built. And, that was kind of what got him started, at least with some national recognition. And at that time, we were still, the business phone rang in the house. So I'll never forget, because like in '89, I would have been 14. So I would he'd have me help answer the phone. Well, you can imagine if you're calling what you think is a gun shop or a manufacturer, and you hear a 14-year-old boy,
hello,
I got called ma'am a lot. And not great for a 14-year-old's ego, but it was all part of it, because, they would call like during our dinner hour. We would, a lot of times he'd be interrupted in the middle of dinner taking a business call or whatever it was. And we really thought the business had taken leaps and bounds when we finally got a separate number to put out in the actual shop.
Right.
That was all based on, a lot of that all came from that article in the late 80s. And I think it was, like I said, it was 1989, and it was American Handgunner. You were right on that.
So, Scott, with that, what was the main focus at first? Was it rifles or pistols?
When he decided to narrow it was kind of a little bit of a mixed bag of everything.
Okay.
When he started narrowing his focus, it was the majority rifles, and then like the Ruger Mark I and Mark II pistol at the time.
Gotcha.
But he fought a lot of resistance, like making parts for the 1022, because I remember when we had an aftermarket barrel, and I think at the time it was going to sell like for $200 retail. And the few distributors that he had, they're like, nobody's ever going to spend $200 on a barrel for a Ruger 1022.
Yeah.
And
I did.
And
you did.
Fortunately, a lot of people did.
Yeah.
But it was, and the good thing for us is he was very stubborn. So even though he kept getting rejected, he's like, I think there's something there. But then because they didn't think the barrel would go, he started working on like the trigger parts and some of the drop-in parts. And like some of the drop-in parts for the pistol, for the trigger, that was more out of necessity for him to be able to build more guns. He didn't have the man hours to stone all the hammers, polish all the sears. And I think his quote was, I'm going to make it so easy that even you can help me do them.
It's smart business practice, though.
Good business practice. Yeah.
But I was going to say, thinking honestly, just the alpha male, whatever you want to call it. When you come into the firearms realm, you look and you're like, 22. No, I need bigger, bigger, bigger. And so you start shooting higher calibers and you start working your way up. And then, even if you're lucky enough to, in this firearms landscape, to shoot or even own a 50 BMG. Yeah, it's so great. And then once you become seasoned in firearms, you start realizing, man, this ammo is getting super expensive. And it doesn't matter if you're a handgun shooter, a rifle shooter, whatever, you always transition back. I personally have a 22 LR set up as an AR that matches my hits the fan rifle per se. It matches to a T. Same optics, same stock, same handrail, same upper, same lower, same everything. The only difference is I've went to a full 22 barrel, not a conversion, and a 22 bolt. But it's A, because it's a lot cheaper to shoot, but also B, it's that manual of arms, everything is the same. And I think with 22, what you guys have done is that not only have you created a caliber, or not created a caliber, but created a firearm using a caliber that is inexpensive to shoot. I think where you have took it to the next level is you have created an ultra accurate platform for the 22, which, I mean, that's hard to do. I mean, that's really actually hard to do for a, most likely lead poured bullet. I mean, rimfire. I don't know the quality control as far as rimfire ammunition goes. I'm sure it's pretty good, but I mean, in reality,
some are better than others. But
yeah. I mean, just
the one thing I always,
it's a dirty round. It is a dirty round. So to create something that is reliable and accurate, I mean, it's almost faux pas. I mean, to be honest, and you've done it.
And it's something that, we're never satisfied with where we're at, and we're constantly trying like new finishes just because it is so difficult to get a 22 to run reliably. And, on the ammo side, it's funny because when people store their centerfire ammo, they have it climate controlled. They have it all labeled. Everything's perfect.
22.
When they call and they have a problem with the 22, I'm like, what were you shooting? I don't know. I grabbed some out of the bucket that I have in my basement.
Yes. Yep.
That's it. That's it.
Yep.
And then it's on us to figure out why, their new rifle, new pistol, whatever isn't working. But we don't know. This ammo could be 25 years old. It could be, and we'll get pictures sometimes, and I'm like, I don't think they've made that box since I was a kid.
The box still is packed with sawdust and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, I mean,
man.
think about it. Like back in the 80s, I mean, 22 is still inexpensive, but back in the 80s, I mean, you could buy 20, 30,000 rounds of 22 for almost nothing, So like, you could buy 5-year supply, 10-year supply of it.
And I think people would buy it because you could buy it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So every time they went in, they would just pick up a few more boxes, and then yeah.
Grocery stores in Idaho still sell 22. Like it's everywhere.
So talk to me, and I know it's the vision and the intelligence of your dad, but as you've grown further into this company, you've still made strides in advancement. How are you guys able to create a product that is, before we even get into rifle versus pistol, just in general, how are you guys able to create a product that is as reliable and as accurate as the offerings are? I mean, it's actually quite remarkable.
I think it's a couple things. I think the main thing is we've stayed in our lane for so long. There's been a lot of times that people, that kind of like, when are you going to grow up and get into real ammunition, or, get into center fires or different things like that. But the other side of it is when we set out to work on something, we don't look at cost or anything on that side. Our goal is if we can get it to work.
Yeah.
We'll figure out if we can market it at whatever cost it has to be at once it works. And there's a lot of times that, I'll use our internal parts, for example. Guys will be like, you can make those through this process or that process, and you'd save yourself a lot of money and time. Because a lot of our internal parts are all like wire EDM cut.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I understand this, but every time we try to take a shortcut, we get a shortcut result.
It bites you. It ends up biting you.
Yes. And the other thing that I think helps us with this is we do all of our own machining in-house.
Awesome.
So when we want to try something or experiment with something, it's not waiting for another company to do the prototype. They send it to us. We test it, send it back. Because a lot of times, and I understand that's just how business works sometimes, but in our dealings, machine companies will say, we're going to overnight this part to you. We have a machine being held. you have 24 hours to let us know if this works. 24 hours isn't always enough time to vet a product.
No, it's not.
Where when we're machining it, we realize it's, we don't want a machine to sit, but okay, this machine may sit a week, 10 days, because we have to test this thoroughly to make sure the change that we're going to make is going to be an improvement.
Yes.
That makes sense. So Scott, right now, like, would you say, I mean, obviously you're machining a lot of your parts, is like 90, 95%, like how much of your firearms is actually made in-house then?
So the entire receiver, all the internal components are all made in-house. The barrels we do outsource, and we've been with the same company that started with Dad back in the early 90s on those.
Awesome.
And then the other thing we do is, like, all of our bolts, at least on the 22 side, have a DLC coating on them, which goes back to, you talked about how dirty it was. That's the way we have it done. And I think DLC coating gets overused because there's right ways to do it, and there's ways to do it just to say it's DLC coated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So the way that we do it is very expensive, where a lot of companies don't want to absorb that cost. But we have found when it's done right, we shoot like when we do a demo, we shoot our pistols or our rifles dry. We don't put any lubrication on them. We don't clean them during the day.
Oh,
Like we did an event in April. It was a suppressor event where we shot 2,500 rounds in one day. We never cleaned the pistol that we had down there.
Dang.
I can attest to, as an SOT, I've got a full auto 22 that I run suppressed. So that's double whammy. And
It's nasty.
dude, it's nasty.
It's dirty.
Four mags in, you start having some issues when you're running it that way without lubricating and doing the proper, cleaning regimen and getting it ready. Like when you're just saying, hey, I'm going to use it like I normally, like in the real world application. Yeah. I mean, 4 mags in, you start having a failure to fire or a light primer strike or something. And you're like, oh man, but you guys have figured out how with the DLC, I'm assuming that.
Correct. Because it allows you to basically run it dry, because what most people do is they run it dry or with maybe a little minimal lubrication, and then they start to have failures. So their first answer is it must need more lubrication.
I mean, that's
oil everywhere.
And we'll get some guns in from people, and they're like, it's just not running like it did when it was new. And like the techs will text me a picture. They're like, can you please send this to the customer? Look at this thing. Yeah. And I mean,
I'm using paper towels.
Have you ever cleaned it, sir?
Clean up the excess of everything.
It's funny. We do a lot of installs for people's like accurizing kits for their pistols.
Uh-huh.
And it got so bad. Finally, the techs were like, can we please incorporate a cleaning charge? Because we have to clean it anyway.
Yeah.
But they were so bad that it takes us longer to clean up a lot of times the mess that we receive than it does to install the parts.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
interesting. 22 LR.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys about this because I guess I'm going to ask, it's a 2-part question. And it's something I'm really interested in. I think to date, the longest shot I've ever taken with a 22 LR is probably 65 yards. Now I know I know, Matt, shut up. I know that's lightweight.
Caught me off guard, bro. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you got more than 65 yards in your backyard. I was just surprised. I apologize.
I know, but when I'm shooting 65 yards, I mean, with a 22, I'm shooting some sort of pest or varmint or whatever, because just rule of thumb with me, because I've got my short range, I don't shoot steel with 22 because I don't want to get hit with it. So I'll shoot paper, but when I'm shooting long distance, it was a weird thing. So I don't shoot that far. To your knowledge, and we won't hold you to this. We won't, he said this. What's the farthest that someone has taken a shot with one of yours?
we have a customer out west who, and I'm going off what he sent me, so
Correct.
I didn't go out and measure it for him, but
Yes, it's hearsay for sure.
yeah, he the furthest out that he had hit something was like 568 yards with it.
Hell yes.
Wow.
I love that. I love that.
You know, and at that point, I think it's just, yes, there's some skill involved, but it's also, I mean, you're lobbing it out there.
It's 85% luck, but still, I mean, just the slightest breeze is going to throw that off.
Yeah, but we'll have guys that'll shoot our 6-inch pistol barrels out to 100 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, you also have guys that shoot backwards with your guns and do trick shots. So
yeah. Oh, well, yeah. So definitely shout out, now that we're recording, definitely shout out Pew Culture for doing an outstanding job of talking about Volquartsen. I'm sure there's other content creators, but he's one of our guys that we want to say thank you for putting that content out. But yeah, he is king of putting himself or his brother or a friend out there shooting, and whether it's shooting backwards with a mirror or shooting long distance, like, he never ceases to amaze with that stuff.
And I think what's so fun about that is, you know, even shooting a pistol out to 100 yards, especially a 22, is a long ways.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of guys have access to a 100-yard range that they can go try. When you see people do long distance, you know, true long range shooting at 1,000 or 2,000 yards, a lot of people don't have access or the means to go try. They want to try it, but maybe, I mean, whether they don't have the space, they don't have the right equipment. Where most people, you know, whether it's one of ours or whatever, have a 22 pistol that they can go try to duplicate what they've seen somebody else do. And you can find 50 to 100-yard range a lot easier than you can, you know.
That's so true. I was going to say, watching people like Ray, or one of our friends who shoots extreme long distance, she'll shoot a 2-mile course. Not everybody has the equipment, like you said, or the distance to shoot 2 miles, but most everybody can piece together a 100-yard range somewhere close to them to say, you know, hey, this is fun. Let's see if I can hit this. See if I can ring steel at 100 yards on 22.
You know, the cost or the barrier to entry to do that is so much lower than trying to have the right equipment to go shoot at 2 miles.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. So my Volquartsen story is, it honestly is kind of my, I mean, you mentioned this earlier, gateway drug into custom firearms. And at 18 years old, I bought a Ruger 1022 just because, you know, I had 2 guns at that time or something. It was like my second gun. I'm like, 22s are fun. I'm an Idaho boy. I've shot 22s forever and ever. I'm going to have a Ruger 1022. But Volquartsen was my gateway to custom firearms. I ended up with a Volquartsen barrel. I ended up with a trigger. I ended up with the bolt release. That was the first gun I spent way more money than I ever should have. But I could hit a whistle pig at 250 yards with a 1022. And it was downhill from there. And when I went to look for an extractor for my Remington 870, that a Wingmaster that my grandpa handed down to me, I chose the Volquartsen. I was really excited to see that you guys did other stuff besides 22. But now I'm in talking to you and doing a little more research through the last couple of weeks about the company. Like, it's really cool that it is a family company. It still is a family company, and you guys are a company that I respect. And
well, thank you.
I appreciate what you do for the 1022. I love it.
What's cool for us is, like, that story right there is we've been doing it long enough now, and I've been very fortunate to be involved for a long time. Is we'll have guys that'll call and say, I built this with my dad, and now I have the money. I'm going to buy my own complete, you know, one of your complete firearms, but they'll remember that they build up a 1022, or, you know, they put a trigger in their pistol, whatever it might be with our parts, with their, you know, dad or grandfather, you know, 30 years ago. And to me, that's one of the fun things, is being, you know, being a family-owned or family-run business, is now having, you know, getting to know, like, the customer and the family. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing cooler than somebody, oh, my grandpa, or, you know, my dad, we went out and shot this together. Like, those are the stories that, I think are the best.
The company and the customers are now multi-generational.
Yes.
Yeah,
It started all of this mess in here. It's your fault.
I was going to say it's pretty funny because my dad actually brought me a AR-15. He brought me the M&P 22, M&P, what is it, AR-15 22, and he said, "Hey, I'm having a problem with extraction." And I shit you not, guys. He said this, and he brought it to me, and the spring, the plunger, the extractor, everything shot out of the bolt. So I'm literally, we'll zoom in later, but this is an order yesterday from Brownells as an SOT, but I ordered the plunger, the spring, and the Volquartsen extractor for this, not because you guys are coming on the show, but because I know that when we buy these things, we're going to get quality. And it's ironic, just like you said, Matt, it's like, hey, I'm buying parts from this company, supporting this company, because I know it's quality.
I love that. I mean, the fact that you're supporting, like, not just your guns that you're building for everyone else. And you mentioned something earlier, Scott. You talked about, like, how people have pressured you. Why haven't you moved up into the big boy rounds, or whatever they want to call them, you know, a larger. And the thing is, I'm sure right now it'd be easy for you guys to make an AR-15, right? Oh, we're gonna make an AR-15 now, right? That'd be financially not that hard to do. It's simple, right? But you haven't. You stay true to what you started with. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of gun companies. Is as soon as they get successful, then they decide to branch out. Well, we'll make this. We'll make this. And I think
they start chasing stuff around.
Yeah, and they're not staying true to where they came from. So I do appreciate that about an American-made firearms company that's staying true to what they started out with, and not just, well, I mean, I'm not hating on other companies, but anyone can make an AR-15. No offense. I'm sorry. Anyone can do it. And I'll even say this, and I'm going to make some guys mad. Anyone can make a 1911 or a 2011. Sorry. It's not that complicated. But to sit there and say, no, we're going to stay focused on what we started with, I can appreciate that.
Well, we've learned that from Eric, because we have had times where we branched out, and then we kind of lose our focus or our quality control, and we rein ourselves back in and, like, okay, let's make sure we're maximizing everything we can do the best way. And if we can achieve that, then it's fine to branch out. But we had some parts that we were making and they were okay, but neither my brother or I were really excited about them.
Right.
Yeah. And it was tough because they were making money, but we're like, that's not who we are, and it's the wrong path to go down.
Bravo for that.
So a lot of that.
No, I was going to say, speaking of what the paths you guys go down, looking at your current offerings, I kind of want to move into that if it's okay.
Okay.
I understand when 22 also as well, you've got the 17, which is a fun round for anybody who hasn't shot one. I'm looking at your rifles and I see, your standard 22 LR rifles. I'm also seeing your Summit. I'm also looking at the VT2 takedown. Man, that Summit right there with that crazy good looking stock right there. That wood stock is amazing. And then I'm going to look at your pistols, which are going to be the Mamba, the ENV, the Scorpion. If someone was looking to get into 22 more than just their squirrel gun or their 10-22, and they wanted to get into really precision shooting, would you steer them for their first purchase? Let's say somebody's going to buy Volquartsen today. Would you steer them to the pistol or to the rifle? And which one? I know it's a tough question.
Yeah.
Because
if it was like somebody brand new into shooting, I would probably steer them towards a rifle. Because I think it's easier to set them up for success with a rifle.
Amen.
Yeah. Than it is with a pistol.
I agree with that.
On the flip side of that, I think a lot of times people have more fun with a pistol than they do a rifle.
I agree with that.
So
we're speaking the same language here. It's like, to get someone interested in shooting in general, it's definitely a rifle. You can put it on a bench. Even if it's a 22, you can sandbag the front and just say, okay, this is easy. You're basically pulling the trigger. No major skill. And then when you move to pistol, it's all right, there's a little skill, but there's not a lot of recoil. And I don't know. I just love that. I love that.
And that's what, we enjoy is like our pistols will shoot so flat that it allows somebody, especially a new shooter, to hone their technique without developing bad habits.
Agree. Definitely agree with that.
The other thing that, and I've been told by other people, is they enjoy, especially if they're going to suppress it, because it's so quiet when you're shooting rimfire suppressed. And if it's, obviously this goes back to the thing, you got to get it to run.
It's that DLC stuff.
You can go back and have a normal conversation with somebody as you're teaching them or instructing them, which is not always the case with larger calibers when you have ear pro on and, there's just a lot more recoil, a lot more noise. So it's a great gun to start them with. But I think if I was going to start somebody, I'd start them with a rifle.
Yeah,
That's a good assessment.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree because I've got a young daughter I went and shot today and I said, I'm going to shoot. And I invited my wife out because I was shooting pistol. I was shooting 9mm, but I was like, hey, I'm going to go shoot. If you want to go shoot, come shoot with me. And my daughter was like, I want to shoot with you. And I was like, well, I'm not shooting lower calibers today. So not today. Maybe another time I'll get you in. And she was like, all right, cool. But I think that 22, whether it be a kid or it be a new shooter in general, 22 is one of the best cartridges to level the playing field and make everyone feel comfortable. And then when you're actually shooting quality like a Volquartsen, it's not only are you getting that comfort and that minimal recoil, you're also getting accuracy. So you're building that confidence with that person saying, hey, I can hit this target. This isn't that bad. This is actually fun. Let me see if I can do this again.
And that's where it's important for us that it's going to also run reliably, because if you're introducing somebody new and all they're doing is clearing jams, it's
not that fun.
It's going to take away a lot of the fun. And the other thing, to your point, you talk about like new shooters and all that. The other demographic that we've really picked up on lately, and it kind of surprised me, is older shooters.
That makes sense.
Who have already, they're like, whether they're retired military or law enforcement or just whatever, they're like, I've shot the big stuff for 30 years. I just want to go out and plank. I want to do it affordably. Or they may have had an injury like a shoulder, wrist, whatever. And the recoil of a 22 is much easier. But it's been surprising to us how many like that demographic, and granted they have more disposable income typically.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to give you the opportunity not to, I guess, disparage the ammo manufacturers, but I'm going to do it on my own personal behalf. And these are not your words, but I can only understand that it's got to be frustrating, though, in this day and age where every manufacturer is playing with powders and hybrids and all these things. Now, all of a sudden, 22 has so many different offerings from, I won't even say names, but from now we're making subsonic 22s to now we're making, hush, quiet 22 rounds to high speed rounds to all these rounds.
Heavyweight.
Yeah, I'm like, man, you guys are literally putting like 0.3 grains of powder in a case. It seems like, I know it's not the case, but it's like you guys are basically putting the equivalent of a small pistol primer worth of powder in these things and expecting them to be accurate only because you're chasing a sound threshold. And, how are your rifles performing with those? I understand certain things are going to have issues. It's just, it's going to be a thing, but that's got to be tough for you guys to battle with customer service. Hey, I'm shooting this and it's not doing this, or it's not cycling or whatever. And these are things that wouldn't cycle in a regular, rifle, unsuppressed, whatever. Like, talk about that.
There's so many different bullet shapes that are out there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, like one of the big things that we see is, and I'm sure other manufacturers in the exact same boat, but there's so many guys that'll build like a hybrid rifle with some of our parts, another company's magazines, another company's, let's say, magazine release or trigger group or whatever. And then trying to diagnose what might be happening or causing the issue. Mm-hmm. And then you throw in the mix of the ammunition on that. And to your point, there's a couple different, there's even like, the CCI Quiet, there's two different versions of that. There's one that's rated at 710 feet per second. Then there's their semi-auto one. Mm-hmm. But most people, when they go to the store and buy it, I don't think they're separating those. They're just, the Quiet, I'll grab those.
They're on the shelf.
Right. They're on the shelf. So I guess our thing is, what we try to do is put ourselves in the customer's shoes, and we will try to help, even if we don't think it's our parts. Mm-hmm. Is we'll do everything we can, and it's much easier now because you can text a picture, you can FaceTime somebody, they can send you a video. I remember being on the phone for hours back in the day because they were trying to describe something, I was trying to describe how to fix it, and we were on two completely different planets. But it's become much easier. But there's also a catch to, like, and I'm going to brag a little bit about the guys that handle like our tech and our customer service. I think they do a phenomenal job.
For sure.
Our customers know that too. So they may buy one part from us and have multiple parts from other companies, but we're going to get the phone call when they're trying to fix it. Mm-hmm. Both from, they do have one of our parts, but they also know that we've been doing the Rimfires for a long time.
Yes.
So, and at times, it can be frustrating because it does become very time consuming. But for the most part, even though there's so many different ammunitions out there, I feel like that's the one thing that's helped with the Rimfire ammo has gone up over the last decade.
Yeah.
But I feel like certain manufacturers have put that back into their manufacturing processes, mm-hmm. and it's become more reliable. Not necessarily more accurate at times, but more reliable.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
And, and then when it comes to accuracy, a lot of times I'll tell guys, you're going to get what you pay for.
That's fair. That's mm-hmm. fair. So, Scott, I hear a lot of you talk about customer service and like being on the telephone and, with your tech guys, you've mentioned this a lot. So obviously you guys do that a lot. So I'm guessing, I'm gonna speculate, you probably have some pretty great customer service. You're a family-based company. So we buy a pistol, someone buys a rifle, and there's a problem with it. Like, talk to us, like, if there is an issue, because you're manufacturing stuff. Nothing's always perfect. What's the process? Like, what's kind of warranty? Like, what's your customer service process?
So basically what we do is, because it is so hard to ship a firearm for a lot of people, they don't want to take it to their dealer. They don't want to have to do whatever. And they just spend a lot of money on a 22. They don't want to have to send it back in. So we try to make it as easy as possible. We email them a UPS return label. So we cover shipping both ways. And like, if you read our terms and conditions, our warranty is 1 year. But if it's something that, and I've learned this from my dad, if it's something that has failed in our parts or something that was machined improperly, even if it's a rifle pistol that we built 20 years ago, we'll send them a return label, get it back in here, and fix it completely under warranty.
Nice. That's awesome.
So, once again, I always try to put I try to see it from the perspective of the customer. If I just spent $1,500 on a 22 and it's not working, or even if it's 5-6 years old, how would I want to be treated if that was me?
Yeah.
And I give a lot of credit to my parents for the way they handled customer service when I was learning through them. And there's a lot of times I'm sure we get taken advantage of on certain things because we'll send out a return tag. we get the firearm in, and they may have left out a few details about what they had done to it.
Well, you have to do that.
Now you have it.
Yeah.
That's how you get companies to warranty stuff.
That's how you get the warranty honored.
Yeah. So, but the thing that we've learned too is I think that's how we've built customers that have become very loyal to the point that their kids will eventually buy from us, or they come back and they'll buy from us again. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have some customers that just for their private collection have 15 to 20 of our firearms.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Not a real smart man, but carry the one.
So I got another question before Matt jumps in here, because I think I was just going to
say, and the thing is, you may not know that guy has 19 firearms.
That's crazy.
So when they send the 20th one in, you're like, that's not what they told us or whatever. For the minimal cost that it takes for us to get that in there and get it fixed for what they've spent. And the way I try to teach it is we treat all of our customers as if they own 20.
Right.
Yes. Well, I do, before Matt jumps in, I do want to say this. I'm looking at your site right now, and I do want to read these off. It's not very many. Your core values on your website. I think this sums up Volquartsen, and I don't think it could be said any better. Heirloom quality, built to be timeless. Commit to innovation, always learning, growing, and moving forward. Treat everybody like family. It's all about relationships, just like you said. Whether you've bought 1 or 20, treat everyone like they've bought 20 from you. Do the right thing. When in doubt, start here. That's customer service 101. Unfortunately, it's hey, customer's always right. Hate to say that until proven otherwise. Engineer the world's finest firearms, design performance and reliability with no compromise. And you're showing that through your quality and your attention to detail and the reliability and performance from your firearms. Excellence is essential, no exceptions. I mean, that needs no further highlighting. Each product is a promise, a pledge to build each product to the best of our ability. And I think you guys do that, starting at the family level and then branching out, like you said, to the extended family, best way to put that. And everyone's taking pride in their work and the quality. And then, of course, like we started at the very beginning, keeping it fun in the office, in the shop, at the range. Shooting is a very heavy subject, and firearms is a very heavy topic that makes people feel many different types of ways. But at the end of the day, firearms, if you get them in the right hands and the right environment, are an extremely fun thing to experience. Hats off to that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not full of a bunch of legal jargon or micro tiny print for the warranty. Like that's, I would say it's probably pretty rare nowadays. So, hats off to you guys.
Thank you.
I do ask a question to everybody, and I don't want to jump into that quite yet because we've talked quite a bit about the past of Volquartsen, what you guys do, what you're currently doing. You've talked a little bit about when you branch out to do other lines and coming back, but right now, is there anything in the works that you can shed a little light on or would like to? Is there anything that is new to Volquartsen that you're excited about and could talk about?
Some of the new things we're doing is hopefully the first part of next year we'll be launching several different collaborations with suppressor companies. Because we build our firearms to be designed, to be suppressed. And again, it's one of those things people are like, well, can't you make suppressors? I'm like, you can, but there's companies that's all they do. They do it better than.
Why? Yeah. Why do that?
Our lane.
Let's stay in our lane. We'll get them to work. You guys get them to be quiet.
So Scott, I think there's something to be said for that. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm unfortunately going to. That's what I do. It's my nature. suppressing 30 caliber, suppressing 5.56, suppressing 9mm, suppressing these things. This is a fast moving projectile that in essence on paper is a lot easier to suppress than 22. Now I understand 22. Yeah, it's just a smaller diameter, this, that, and the other, but the feet per second, the muzzle velocity, all of those things are so much smaller. So to be able to create a firearm that is suppressor, I guess, plays well with suppressors, and to go in it further, needs a suppressor or works best under a suppressor, that's a hard task.
And it is because, you have the additional blowback. So, all the problems we've mentioned prior, yes. But it's that's where, and I hate to keep coming back and sound like a broken record, but that DLC coated bolt that we offer. And, the other part of that is the way we machine our bolts, every single one of them gets inspected as it comes off the lathe. Mm-hmm. Because, it might be overkill, but it's one of those things that if the tolerances start acting up on those, we start to see all sorts of weird problems.
Yes.
But we're excited about working on a couple of these different things because we haven't done a lot of collaborations in the past like this. Mm-hmm. And part of that is probably we're overly protective of if we're going to put our name on it or even be involved with it, we want to make sure the other company has the same thought process or mindset that we do. Mm-hmm. Because I think that could be another issue where, right now the big thing is everybody's collaborating.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm like, sometimes
good
like,
or
what
bad.
Is that? Good or bad?
Good and bad.
Some are great and others are, simply a way to put another product out there and which I understand, and my thing is I don't ever try to criticize anybody. Everybody has their own reasons for doing it, but we also have ours and we're going to stick to them.
I agree with that.
So that's one of the new things we're doing. And one of the other big projects we're working on is since we introduced the Summit or started producing the Summit, the big thing people wanted was a takedown version of that.
Mm. Ooh, nice.
So that is the next thing we're working on.
Kind of like a ranch rifle almost.
Correct. Because when you shoot the Summit suppress, you really don't hear anything because there's nothing coming out the ejection port like on our semi-autos.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But because it's a locked breech with the way the straight pull works, head spacing is a much more delicate situation. So when we do the takedown to get it to work, everything's going to have to be much more precise than we could. On the semi-auto, you get a little room for error because you're basically dealing with, well, lack of a better term, like a floating bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you don't get that luxury with a like the straight pull that we use in the Summit.
I find that interesting that you guys are using the straight pull because I'm going to get so much hate on this. I think it's the right way, but the United States, the America, the Western world has still yet to adopt the straight pull full time. When you look over in Europe, you look over
Swiss
to our, I mean, they have perfected the straight pull, and now because we are so far along, straight pull seems weird to most people. And I mean, rightfully so. We're so used to this, but straight pull, I think, God, I'm gonna get hit. I think it's the way, man. I think it's the way.
They're pretty cool.
Job, I hate to say it.
Well, the nice thing about like doing the way we do our Summit is it's still in a, like they use 1022 stocks and barrels if you just want to buy the action.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So in states like New York or Washington, where semi-autos are much more regulated, they can still use their 1022 barrel they may have. They can use their stock they already have, and they can just buy the straight pull. And, it's obviously not as fast as a semi-auto, but it's still faster than a conventional bolt.
Correct.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of people when they see that, like when we do a demo, it's a very foreign thing to them. Mm-hmm. But then like when we go over to IWA in Germany, they're all over the place.
It's normal. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, this is easy.
But it's funny. We're getting ready to start putting our stuff together for IWA next year. It's funny how they're starting to adopt a little bit of the whole SHOT Show mentality of having like brand ambassadors in your booth and, the stuff they made fun of us for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. They're starting to do a little bit more of that than they ever have before.
It all comes around.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we will be on the lookout for the collaboration and also that new summit takedown for sure.
If we get the one collaboration to work the way we want, it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, we would love to have you back when the time comes that you guys are actually making those announcements of when those are going to be coming out. Of course, if you'd like to come back, we would love to have you to make those announcements.
Yeah, and also the other thing I do want to say is, like you said, you brought up SHOT Show. We're actually going to be at SHOT this year, so we're excited about that. So hopefully, if you're there, we cross paths and we can catch up even more. Definitely.
Yeah, that would be great. We don't exhibit right now at SHOT.
So you just walk.
Correct. We did for like 30 years.
It's a waste of money, man.
And then we didn't exhibit the year after SHOT, or after the whole COVID disaster. So we lost all our priority points and everything else. Mm-hmm. So we're like, they can't penalize us any further. Let's just see what happens without exhibiting.
Well, I think you're good, though, because talking to a lot of people, it used to be the mindset that at SHOT Show, from what I've heard, manufacturers go because it's a necessity. And if you don't go, you'll no longer be relevant, is what the stigma is. But since COVID happened, it's kind of not the case. And you can actually be just as successful at SHOT or not at SHOT if you're having a booth. And man, we just had a guy on last episode, and he was talking about the prices for these booths. I mean, 10 by 10s are, outrageous.
The last year we were going to exhibit was going to be a 40 by 50, which in hindsight was way too big for us, but it was going to put us in a new location.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, when
and
you go
a mortgage
and a second mortgage, and when you go every year, you get caught up in keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're like, if we add this, and then the year that we decided not to go was they weren't 100% sure it was going to happen.
Right.
Mm. And because we were going to a bigger booth, we were going to have to buy a bigger booth to put in the spot.
Yes.
And we started looking at it. We're like, if we spend all that money and they cancel SHOT Show, we just missed out on a significant portion of our marketing budget for the year. And there's no recourse on that.
Oh.
Right.
And then we're like, and why is that amount of our budget being spent in one spot?
Why is that okay? Yeah. Why is that okay?
Yeah. Well,
so,
I mean,
and then with us, what we decided is we're like, okay, we go to SHOT to try to find new dealers. It's the reason a lot of people do.
Yes.
I started asking our team, I'm like, are we maximizing everything we're doing to our current dealers? If we're not, why don't we spend that money and start working more with them? So we developed a range program where we actually send some of our range members guns they don't pay a dime for them, because it allows them to put our guns in their customers' hands.
Wow.
And then they can shoot, because we inevitably get the question, what's so great about your 22 and why is it 3 times the cost of
I need
this one I can buy?
Yeah.
And if we can get them to shoot them, they can usually see a difference.
That's my mentality with suppressors. With mine, I keep a lot of suppressors, because when people come up to buy suppressors, it's, hey, bring your gun. If you don't have your gun, then I've got a couple here we're all direct threat, unfortunately, but that's what we're doing. So you can pick all these different cans and we can take them to the range and we can shoot them, and you can pick which suppressor you want to buy. I love that you guys are doing that mentality with the firearms because, like you said, I mean, they're not inexpensive, but at the same time, quality and craftsmanship. If you actually paid what you wanted to pay for those, you wouldn't be happy with the results, unfortunately. And that's just all of us because we all want top tier product for low to mid tier pricing. And if that was the way it was, everybody be happy, but that's not life. And that's not how this thing works. You pay for what you get.
Right.
And I always try to present it like you were talking about shooting with your daughter.
Yes.
I'm like, when you're out there shooting with your daughter, you don't want to be clearing jams. You don't want to have malfunctions. You want to be out there enjoying the time with your daughter.
Yes.
Father, daughter, whatever it is. And if we can enhance that experience in any way, then we've done our job.
I love that. So we're definitely going to be looking for you walking the floor at SHOT, and we're going to stop you.
We're going to be shooting you in chat a message for sure.
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah,
us.
we're out there all 4 days. So
awesome.
That's crazy. That's going to be a wild one.
All right, Scott. So I got
Matt's question. This is going to be a tough one.
You have to be quiet for me to ask the question, though, Mike.
Shut up. So I'm going to be quiet, but I'm really excited to hear this answer.
So I am too, because we've talked a lot about Volquartsen. We've talked a lot about 1022 variants and your builds off of those. And I'm excited because we talked just a little bit about Scott the shooter, Scott the sportsman. But, and this is stolen from somebody else. This isn't an original idea of ours, but we like to ask everybody. NFA doesn't matter. The cost of ammunition doesn't matter. It's not the zombie apocalypse. It's just everyday life. For the rest of your life, you only get 5 guns. Scott the shooter, what 5 guns are you taking for the rest of your life?
that's a tough question.
It's a tough one.
Yeah,
It's a lot of bases to cover with only 5 guns.
Because everybody wants 25.
Exactly.
One too many, 1,000, never enough.
Well, the one easy one, and since I can't pick ours, whatever brand you want
to pick your own.
I would say
you can pick your
integrally
own.
suppressed 22.
Okay.
An MP5.
Oof.
Good choice.
Good choice. I got my first MP5. So did Adam. First MP5 experience this summer at Mike's house. He's got a sample gun, and I'm ruined. I'm ruined.
I'm not sure if this one makes the most sense, but I'm going to say it. A Barrett 50 cal.
Makes
Yes.
all the sense in the world for
all
hunting
the
squirrels.
The reason for that is the very first SHOT Show I went into, the first door I walk in, Barrett's booth is right there. And this is like back in the 90s. And Ronnie's standing there, in his suit. And
He never
just
wore,
like
he always
like
wore
an
a suit.
aura. I'm like, that. And this is my first SHOT Show. I'm 20 years old. I'm like, I need that.
Oh,
I don't
Unfortunately-
know what for, but I need it.
Unfortunately, my 20-year-old budget could not afford it, but
my 35-year-old budget can't afford that thing.
I love that though. So we got a
All right.
50, and we got our 22 suppressed,
We got
and an MP5.
we got 2 left. Got
probably
2
something
left.
like a Mossberg 500.
Ooh, we got a shotgun. I love
Good
it.
choice. Good choice.
Good reliable pump gun. The last
Then
one.
I would need probably something like a SIG 365.
We got a
Okay.
pistol.
Nice practical
Good
pistol.
choice. Good
So,
choice, and we can run a
We got
conversion
long range
program.
and shotguns. That means he hates AKs. That's it.
Most
Everybody
people do.
hates
Yeah,
AKs.
Everybody hates AKs.
AKs but you.
No, good choices. Good choices.
My thing is a lot of times when I look at firearms is like I look at the engineering and all the work that like would have gone into developing the 50 cal
Yeah.
Yeah.
and almost try to I get caught up sometimes in looking at stuff like that way.
Yeah,
It's hard to
funny,
separate
though.
like the design, the business versus like the shooter sometime.
Or the practicality, like
practicality.
It's okay to like it just because it's a cool piece of engineering. Like,
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's funny though, Adam. You remember hearing the story about Barrett? Ronnie Barrett sold the 50 cal idea, the notion, to the military
without a working
without a working model. He made
got them to
the
finance
50, the Model 82 to fire once.
Yeah.
And said, I can make this thing semi-automatic and blah, blah. Look. And he shot one time and they said, we'll take them. He was like,
I mean, he might have embellished what was really, he embellished a lot.
and it was
day.
all dang. How do we make this really work? I just got some sold. I love that.
Like I said, that was 30 years ago that I was at that SHOT Show, and I still remember walking in, seeing it, and seeing him in his suit, and I'm like, Dad, I was new into the industry, and I'm like, I was just wide-eyed or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, Dad's got, we got an expensive show. He's focused on what we got to go do, and I'm like, but did you see that?
Yes, Dad, look at that.
Yes.
Cool. All really great choices. Well, Scott, it has been a great talk. We want to thank you for thank you for taking the time, especially on a Sunday evening, the time away from your family, the time away from your business, to sit down and talk with some degenerates like ourselves. But
well, thank you guys for having me. I enjoyed it.
Big thank you once again to Scott Volquartsen. I learned a ton about this company. I knew a little bit about them, but learning the history, the lineage there is just amazing. Guys, Mike? What was your take on this?
I mean, honestly, it's the company values and looking at, just the core values. Anything that you think that if you were to start a company, what you would not compromise on, that is what Volquartsen does not compromise on. And hearing that this is yet again another firearm manufacturer in our industry that is a second generation that is passing on something and continuing to keep our community and our sport alive. Kudos to them, man. Matt, what about you, brother?
I mean, a lot of really similar stuff. Again, the deeper that we get into this, the more folks that we talk to, the more that we find out that a lot of these firearm companies, a lot of the companies in this space are family businesses. And it was really cool to get to sit down and talk with a company that, again, they kind of jump-started my interest in customizing guns, and kind of like meeting one of your heroes, had them up on a pedestal for a bit, but it's cool to see the man behind it.
Yeah, dude, I just bought an extractor and a plunger and a spring and everything for a Smith & Wesson M&P 22 from them, and it was before I even knew that these guys were booked to come on. So it's I'm a customer myself, so I think it's really cool to have them on and tell their story.
Yeah, and then on the big thing for me, guys, American-made company, still doing it in-house, and a big shout out to them. Guys, you got anything else for me?
Other than
Put a bow on it, baby.
All right,
Go
Scott.
on, man.
Like we always say, stay dangerous, carry a weapon. We'll talk to you soon.